What happens when researchers pull the safety rails off of frontier agents? UK evaluators logged 19 unsanctioned actions in 122 controlled runs in tests that were specifically meant to catch and disclose potential containment flaws for AI. So here's the claim I'll stand behind. Our testing should expect and encourage agents to find every possible opening. When they find flaws and hack systems, we benefit, because that's exactly how we learn to prevent it. Come with me, let's get into it. The UK Safety Institute built a cyber range. That's a sealed test environment where security researchers can attack simulated systems. And then the institute gave agents from Anthropic and OpenAI aggressive security goals. Researchers deliberately removed the safeguards that those agents normally operate under. They wanted to find out how far the systems would go when nothing stopped them. Across 122 runs, evaluators recorded 19 unsanctioned actions. One model produced 17 and another produced 2. Some agents created fake profiles for real GitHub maintainers. They tried to use those identities to socially engineer access. And in another run, an agent planted instructions in a shared workspace for a successor agent to find. That is actually prompt injection. You leave a command where another AI will read it, and then that AI mistakes it for legitimate instruction. Now that last part is really striking. The agent didn't only work toward its own immediate goal, it actually prepared a path for the next agent coming through. Now you're going to see headlines describe behavior like this as rogue AI, but read past those. The agents pursued goals that people gave them inside an experiment designed to push them toward misconduct. Researchers removed the usual safeguards because they wanted the agents to expose unfamiliar ways through containment. That was the experiment. We learned critical information for future security, and the review produced new safeguards for later evaluations. Nothing here shows an AI choosing hostility towards humanity, despite how the clickbait headlines often read. It shows capable systems searching hard for routes to a target, including routes that the human running the test hadn't expected. That's a good thing. Now, this gives us both wonder and friction here. That same persistence can search for a new medicine, a cleaner source of energy, or an answer that scientists have chased for decades. We've seen that happen multiple times here. But when the goal sits inside a security test, that persistence can also uncover a forgotten opening or invent a new approach to deception. The answer is observation strong enough to keep up. Now, on July 31st, we covered a different containment event. 3 Anthropic models reached the open internet and touched outside organizations through a misconfigured evaluation pipeline. In this UK test, the researchers watched the agents inside the control range do what they did, and they discovered their path under that observation that gives people a chance to close it before someone else finds the same path in deployment. Anthropic was behind most of the behavior logged here, and the company also volunteered its agents for scrutiny and allowed those results to become public. That deserves credit. Testing like this loses much of its value if a lab just does it by themselves and then can bury whatever makes it uncomfortable. Yet Anthropic also received privileged access to Washington's secret AI vetting process, which we'll go into in the next story. The company has also committed a reported $10 billion to scarce computing capacity. So those choices all belong in the same picture. Anthropic opened one part of its work to outside examination while strengthening its position inside a closed federal process and the compute market. Now, institutions are often broadening knowledge in one room and then concentrating their own advantage in another, so we should judge each move by what it actually does. In this room, public adversarial testing worked. People set a hard trap, they watched it closely, they caught every attempt, and they published what they learned. That is how we learn what capable agents might try before the stakes move outside the range. All right, moving away here, that UK test gives us a useful standard for oversight. Outsiders can see the method, they can examine the behavior, and they can learn from the result. Now compare that with the framework that Washington finalized yesterday. At a White House meeting yesterday, Tuesday, August 4th, officials briefed OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Meta, and NVIDIA on a voluntary system for reviewing AI models intended for sensitive cyber work. The review includes classified benchmarks and allows participating closed model companies to submit systems for reviews lasting up to 30 days before release. Model access can also be shared with what the framework calls trusted corporate partners. Now, the document itself won't be published. The public can't read it. Independent researchers can't inspect it. Most companies expected to comply won't even see the criteria either. And the framework also leaves the words national security risk undefined because, that's worked so well in the past. The administration said that their reason for not publishing the criteria was that it could give adversaries a map of what the reviews actually look for. And there is some concern inside that argument. If a test reveals every precise tripwire, then an attacker can design around the test. However, protecting specific test material does not require hiding the entire standard. The public can still know what counts as unacceptable risk, how evaluators check it, who gets access, and whether outsiders can still challenge a result. Open methods and repeatable standards are how verification earns trust. A secret criterion asks everyone outside the room to just accept an answer without being able to check the work. And then there's the open model exception. Open weights are model parameters that anyone can download, run, inspect, and modify. Washington reportedly excluded them from this vetting path because the administration said it can't restrict those models after release. And that exposes what this system is built around. And it also shows why we're being led to believe that open and closed models are at odds. A downloadable model has no vendor that officials can call into a closed briefing. It has no owner, per se, who can grant privileged access to only selected partners. Consequently, it ends up providing the public access that it should have been provided in the first place. And because of the bad choice to keep models and vetting processes closed, suddenly it looks like open models and closed models are enemies. What does really look like this framework is sorting the field according to corporate relationships as much as actual measured capability. Closed labs can enter the review, see more of the process, and emerge with a federal signal of approval. Open developers have no path through that gate. And saying that this framework is voluntary doesn't actually remove that advantage either. This certification can shape contracts and access even though Congress is not even involved and has not turned it into any law. Now, Anthropic's role makes the contrast especially sharp here. The company accepted independent testing in the UK, as we covered in the previous story, and they let the public learn what had happened there. In Washington, though, it sits among a few firms with a view into criteria that the broader field can't inspect. Security may require keeping some tests private, sure, but it does not require turning safety into an insider-only credential. A framework built around a small circle of corporate partners will only serve to protect the position of those inside that circle. And it arrives just as downloadable models are closing the capability gap that the gate was designed to manage. And that brings us to the answer already arriving outside Washington's closed process. An independent evaluation from SaferAI found that open-weight models have closed much of the gap on its computer security and biology benchmarks. Those are precisely the areas that the federal framework is aiming to control. Z.AI's downloadable GLM 5.2 still trails the leading closed systems. However, on one cyber comparison, though, the measured distance is only about 4 months. And its built-in safety behavior trails by much more than that. In Casey's tested configuration, GLM 5.2 refused none of the offensive tasks that the closed Opus 4.7 model blocked entirely. That capability gap has narrowed to just months. The refusal gap still remains quite wide. Open models often ship with fewer built-in limits in the first place, and because anyone can change their files, then a hostile operator can also remove whatever refusals remain within minutes. I know I've been talking a lot about the advantages of keeping everything open here, but I do want to emphasize the danger of this doesn't just disappear because the model is open. What it does is it moves the safety work into view, where anyone can examine both the weakness and the response. And the response shipped as a download too just recently. Mistral released Shieldstral, which is a small open-weight model that can sit beside a larger AI and screen what goes in and what comes out. So you think of it as a checkpoint that you can place anywhere. It checks activity against a chosen policy, and it flags or refuses whatever crosses a line. Shieldstral has 3 billion parameters, and it runs on one 16GB graphics card. That's pretty modest by comparison, and therefore very accessible for local deployment. Its Apache 2.0 license allows for broad reuse, and operators can tune it to enforce the policies that they personally need. A security researcher can inspect how it works. A hospital, a local company, or a public agency can run it on its own hardware. Developers can move it without waiting for permission from the company that released it. This is the better path. The screening logic no longer has to remain inside some vendor's black box. And 2 more open releases widen the field even further. Liquid AI shipped a small model built to run agents directly on devices, and MiniMax released a system that can create video with stereo audio. These things are coming out like gangbusters. Taken together, all these releases deliver downloadable capability, local autonomy, and downloadable safety. Now, there's no magic guarantee here, and I'm not trying to get you to believe one. A hostile operator can skip the guardrail. Openness gives people the freedom to strengthen a system and the freedom to weaken it. But closed systems have their own version of that problem. Users must simply trust that the hidden safeguard works as described, and outsiders may have no way to find a hole until something fails. An open guardrail gives the field another route. Anyone can run it, attack it, compare it, change it, and share the fix. Washington's approach treats safety as permission granted at a gate, and they and the labs involved will profit by it. Open weights are catching up to the frontier, and the defenses are now traveling through the same channel. These downloads are available to everyone. All right, from agent oversight, let's move to what happens when that same cycle of action and measurement reaches the wet lab. A team at Tianjin built REAP, R-E-A-P. It pairs AI judgment with robotic experiments to improve enzymes. Now, an enzyme is a biological worker that speeds up a chemical reaction. Improving one can make a manufacturing or a medical process much more efficient. So picture the system as a flywheel. The AI ranks possible edits to a protein, and robots build the strongest candidates and measure how well they work. Those results go back into the next ranking, and the wheel turns again and again with better information. So after only 5 turns, the researchers had really large gains. One enzyme that helped process drugs became 57 times more active. Another enzyme used to stitch proteins together improved as much as 104-fold. Scientists have improved enzymes for decades through directed evolution. They make mini variations, and then they test them, and they keep the strongest and repeat. But REAP guides that search. The AI decides where the next experiments are most likely to pay off, while the robotic system handles the actual building and testing without ever tiring. That is the same propose, test, measure, and refine cycle that we have watched transform software and materials research, and now it's closing around live chemistry. The advantage may grow even more important when scientists don't actually have much data. In silico medicine, working with the University of Chicago and Johns Hopkins, studied a rare and aggressive cancer in the nasal passages and the surrounding tissue. So few people develop it that researchers have not had the large datasets common cancers typically provide. The team produced the first molecular portrait of the disease, and then its AI system surfaced possible drug targets. Some connect to approved inhibitors that researchers may be able to repurpose, and others are new possibilities. That is a starting map for a group of patients who previously had very little, if anything, to guide their research. And then there's the question of where scientists go to test these possible treatments. A team at Ludwig Maximilian University spent 9 years building tiny 3-dimensional clusters of human brain tissue from stem cells. Each cluster is about half the size of a pinhead. The cells organize themselves into brain-like tissue within a week, and they survive for months. The model reproduces the protein deposits, tangles, and inflammation associated with Alzheimer's disease. So when researchers applied an anti-amyloid immune treatment, it cleared deposits inside the tissue. It took us 9 years, Professor Dominic Paquet said. The team is now adapting the model for robotic automation, and that could let researchers screen drug candidates at industrial scale in tissue that captures more of the disease than a flat dish of cells. Now keep the stage of development clear here. These results include enzymes in reactors, possible targets identified from data, and deposits cleared in lab-grown tissue. None has become a therapy proven in a patient yet. And still, the research system itself has changed. The next experiment can learn from the last one immediately. Robotic hands can build and measure while AI searches the space of possibilities. Work that took 9 years to establish can become a platform for the 10th year and every year after it. The wheel doesn't forget its previous turn. All right, bringing it to a close today. The answer to what we are looking for here begins inside that UK cyber range. Capable agents need watchers who expect surprise, test for it deliberately, and let outsiders examine what happened. That test caught and learned from every unsanctioned action. It turned unexpected behavior into stronger safeguards. Washington is offering a different arrangement. A few companies can see only part of the process, and everyone else is asked to trust a secret standard, and downloadable models have no path toward even getting the certification at all. And then the open field shipped another answer, capability that anyone can run, paired with a safety layer that anyone can inspect and improve. Neither closed review nor open code can guarantee perfect behavior, but the stronger system is the one where more people can check the checker, reproduce the finding, and carry the fix somewhere new. The biology work shows the stakes of getting this right. Those agentic loops can improve an enzyme more than 100-fold and find starting points for a rare cancer and turn years of tissue research into an automated drug screening platform done in an afternoon. The capability is moving fast because each result feeds the next attempt. That is the point. Our oversight has to learn the same way. Observe, test, publish, improve. Give more people the ability to watch back. That is the hopeful pattern that we're seeing across today's stories and across how things are changing in general right now in this era of change. Intelligence is becoming more capable, and the means to examine, guide, and share it can spread alongside it. The watchers do not have to be one lab or one federal office. They can be a wide network of researchers, public evaluators, developers, and communities who can all inspect the systems shaping our lives. That is what we should be going for. See you tomorrow.